You're tuned in to Ask the Master Auto Technician. Car questions? Get answers right now. Call 850-763-0555.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed. Beep, 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 yeah.
All right, good morning, everybody. This is James Morris. It is Wednesday morning. Karen's show will be calling around 6:15. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. If you're getting ready for school, it's time to go back to school. School's going. I think during the holidays, I think they get more time off during the holidays than I did when I was going to school. It sure seems like it. But that's another story all in itself. But what we do talk about is car repair and how to get things working right. One of the things I see a lot of people do that are do-it-yourselfers, they work on their own brakes. And because they think that brakes are easy. They do. They say, well, brakes are easy. There's nothing to putting brakes on it. Well, they do certain things that can cause certain problems, and then it just kind of like it's a snowball effect. Let me give you an example. Say you want to put pads on your truck or your car or whatever, so you go buy yourself a set of pads at the local parts store. You take the tires off, you take the caliper off, you push the piston back in, you put pads back on it, put it back together, and off you go. Well, then all of a sudden you start noticing, well, the brakes seem to be dragging all the time. Or it gets to the point where the car won't even move. The brakes are dragging. You're going, what did I do wrong? And you say, well, I must have a damaged caliper, or must have a bad line. So you change the calipers and you change the line. Now you've changed these things and done all this, and you say, okay, well, great, should work. Same problem. You take it to a shop, they look at it and say, I don't see anything wrong with it at the moment. I can't figure out what you've done. The cause this. I said, when did this problem start? It started right after I changed my changed my pads. Well, how did you change your pads? Well, I took the caliper off, took the tires off, took the caliper off, pushed the piston back, put pads on, stuck it together. And this question that I ask, or a good technician will ask, did you open the bleeder valve when you pushed the piston back? If the answer is or bleeder valve, well, the answer is they just probably screwed up the master cylinder, or probably screwed up the valves in the anti-lock brake system that have check valves inside there, and little, what ends up happening, you just shoved 100,000 miles or whatever amount of rust, dirt, corrosion that's inside the bottom of the caliper where the caliper piston is, back into the system, back to where the master cylinder is. That's why I want to caution people, if you're doing your own brake job and you're tuning into the show and you're saying, well, how do I do a brake job right? Well, just throwing pads on isn't a brake job, but it's a start. It's a brake reline. So if you're going to put pads on, the things that you need to do, you need to have first, change your rotors. I don't recommend returning your rotors because it costs just as much time-wise and labor-wise to replace them. To turn them than it does to replace them, and for about the same amount of money. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the reason you want to change your rotors, or we used to resurface them, but the reason is because the old rotors don't have a flat surface anymore.
They're concave.
Yeah.
Now you got to.
And it might be something you can't see, you
can't
can't even feel, but on a dial indicator you can.
If you had a micrometer in there, you see you have between 20 to 40 thousandths difference between the center of the rotor and the outside of the rotor.
So if you don't change your rotors, what happens is you don't have enough contact for the brakes to operate as they're supposed to.
And then the brakes will squeal. They will vibrate.
Also not stop as well.
Yeah, that's true. They're only making contact on maybe a third of the pad. You need to make contact on, and eventually it'll wear down where it's making contact with all of them. But during that first 2 weeks to a month till it wears down, it's not going to be stopping as well, and your brakes aren't going to last as long as the ones that were originally on there. That's why I'm saying, do a brake job right. You make sure that if you're going to take the pads off and put them on there, and you're not going to change the calipers, open the bleeder valve up, push it back, close the bleeder down, put new pads on there, lubricate the contact points on the brake disc pads where they make contact with metal, where it's in the holder, where you actually put the spindle on. If you have to put the pads in there, wherever the pads make contact, there's a special grease that needs to be put on there. If you're not, they're going to vibrate and squeal. But put the grease on there, you'll be surprised how much better your car will stop. Put that little bit of grease on there, not a lot of grease, just enough to kind of just to show it's there. You don't want to overload it, but it's a special grease. Don't put axle grease on it. Worst thing you can do. You'll end up contaminating your brakes, and then you'll have to do all this all over again. But put the special kind of grease on the pads, put it back together like it's supposed to be, push the piston back in. If the piston's not frozen or the caliper doesn't have a problem, make sure you open that bleeder valve first. Change your rotors, put new rotors on. Before you put the rotors on, take them and put them in and wash them with hot soapy water. Because here you are, you've got this brand new rotor. It's nice and shiny. You bought it from the parts store. It's either in a box or a bag or whatever. You go, man, look at this nice shiny. You say, I'll just stick it on there. No, don't do that, because it's been sprayed with kind of a waxy substance that you really can't see, but it's there. It's cosmoline, like they used to pack guns in and old equipment years and years and years ago to keep them from rusting, sitting in storage. So take that and wash it in hot soapy water with a brush, and by the time you rinse it all off and get ready to put it on the car, it'll already start to be rusting. You'll start to see rust developing on it in just that 2 or 3 minutes. And you go, is that normal? Yes. If you don't see that, it ain't clean. Trust me, it's not clean. So that's one of the things I tell my guys. I said, if I walk out here and I don't see that rotor that you just washed in 5 minutes starting to rust, I know you didn't clean it well, and you're going to have to clean it again. Because if not, you're going to contaminate the pads with the cosmoline that's on the rotors. It gets embedded inside there, and then we have all sorts of noise and vibration problems down the line, and customers just don't like that. But the biggest complaint about brakes is not that they don't stop, that they make noise. Either they growl or they grind or they squeak or they squawk, or, not that they don't stop. Normally the biggest problem I have with brakes, like this gentleman right here, was it stops when it shouldn't stop. That was his problem, and couldn't figure out. What we ended up finding out is he had the right hose where the left is and the left where the right was, and there was no room when you made a turn. So when you took a turn to the right or took a turn to the left, the way you had it buckled up on there, it would stretch that brake hose as tight as a banjo string. And I said, I think you've damaged your hoses or whatever, because when you take a turn, you can't, and you've got your brakes on, you've got the fluid inside there, you let off on the brake pedal, and that fluid is trapped inside there, and then you hit it again, and you just keep putting more fluid inside there, and your problem is self-inflicted. So we swapped the brake hoses around, had him go drive it, and I said, see how this works. Well, it seems to be working fine for him, and hopefully it'll stay working fine. But I remind him, if this car acts up again, those hoses you put on wrong, you're going to end up having to replace and put brand new ones back on there again, but this time install them correctly. So doing brakes is not as easy as people may think it is. I used to see advertisements all around. Brake jobs, $49.95 and up. I used to advertise we repair $49.95 and up brake jobs. I don't know how many. I actually saw one time where a car had run through a storefront of a shop that advertised $49.95 brake jobs. And I'm sitting there going, I was just wondering if this is one of their customers, because things have changed over the years. A good set of pads, my cost, a good set of pads on a car, the ones that are designed for your car, could be almost $100 nowadays. They're ceramic. They're high temperature. They're they're dust free. They don't make a lot of dust. You've got good, better, best brake pads out there. Don't be buying just good. Or better. Always buy the best, and make sure you get the right pads to match the rotors. Too many people buy the best pads and they'll buy the cheapest rotors, or the other way around, the best rotors with the cheapest pads. And if you do that, what ends up happening is we get brake torque variation. That's what ends up happening, is the pads the material will actually get embedded into the rotor and making the rotor thicker and thinner, and so when you hit the brakes, you get this vibration that you would say, I have an outer round rotor. No, you don't have an outer round rotor. You got brake torque variation where the pad has gotten inside there, because the metallurgy of the metal of the rotor and the brake pad itself were not matched. That's one of the things we're finding out. You just can't mismatch pads. For years and years, I didn't think anything about putting pads from Napa and putting rotors from CarQuest. Didn't think anything about it. And then we went to a brake seminar, and they explained and said, yeah, you can do that, but you need to make absolutely sure that the brake pads that you bought are designed for that rotor. And that's why you'll find out parts stores will sell you pads and rotors. They have different qualities. You have good, better, and best. And so we say, I want the best brakes I can get. That's the best way to do about it. Yeah, you may spend an extra 10 to 15% more, but you'll get 30 to 40% more life out of your brakes, even if you do it yourself. So almost twice as much on brake life as you would if you didn't do that. put the best rotors and pads on there, and it really makes a difference on how you stop, and it makes a difference on how the car is safely handled. And you know, you don't want to be tearing a car apart every 6 months to a year to fix brakes, or if you get ready to sell it, you take it, someone drives it, man, the brakes make terrible noise. There's nothing wrong with the mechanic says they always make noise after you put pads on them. Don't worry about it. Well, you ain't gonna sell that car. Customers don't like cars that make noise. So if the cars make a brake noise, and that's usually the biggest complaint we get from brakes, not that they don't stop, and not that the pedal goes to the floor, they make noise. That's the biggest problem we get. Well, normally brake noise is due to mismatched parts, such as pads or rotors. Same thing on drums. When you change the rear brake shoes back there, make sure you change the wheel cylinders. Too many people, I see this all the time, they just throw shoes on it. And I go, why you do that? Well, the wheel cylinders weren't leaking. Well, they're going to leak now because you just pushed the wheel cylinders back into someplace they haven't been in the last 30 to 40,000 miles, and all that nasty stuff that was inside that caliper in the front that I was talking about that you pushed out. Well, the same thing happens in the rear wheel cylinders back there. And you can open up the bleeder if you want to and try to push it out, and that might help, but I'll tell you what's going to end up happening is, from my experience, the wheel cylinders will start to leak in about 6 months, and in about a year you'll have a leaky wheel cylinder in a lot of cases on one side that gets all over the brake shoes, and you get to do it all over again. So change your shoes, change your wheel cylinders, change the brake springs, the hold down. Think about it. They're spring steel. They got hot, they got cold, they got hot, they got cold for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. And here you go, you take a tool, you stretch the spring even further than it's been stretched since it was installed. You do your work, you put it back on again by stretching it back over again. Do you think that spring's going to have the same tension as one that had when it was brand new? I don't think so, because, I mean, it's going to have tension on it, don't get me wrong. It's going to work, yeah, but why don't you spend the extra $10? That's about all it costs, $10 for a brake spring repair kit. Change that. Even the adjusters on there. I see people that use the same adjusters, the same everything, and they don't think twice about doing it even though they don't work. And I go, why don't you just change the adjuster there? Because if you don't do that, the brakes aren't going to self-adjust when people put the emergency brake on. That's right, when you put the emergency brake on, your brakes adjust, not when you back up. And they go, well, I don't know. I mean, it got to be expensive. No, we're talking not very expensive at all. They carry all these parts at the local parts store. So when you do your brakes, the best thing I can recommend is change your hardware, front and rear. You know, even on the pads up there, there's little springs on there. Change those hardware. A lot of times that comes with the new pads, especially good pads. Change your hardware. Make sure you change your brake fluid. Make sure you, in the back there, change the wheel cylinders, change the springs, change the shoes, and the drum. You can mic the drum and see if it can be turned again, or replace the drum. Like I said, it's sometimes just as cheap to replace the drum. And the same thing, wash it with hot soapy water because it's sprayed with Cosmoline as well. And if you don't, it'll get all over the shoes, and then the customer will complain months down the road there's something wrong with his rear brakes because they make noise or they shudder or they lock up or whatever, and it's because the shoes have been contaminated with this stuff that's on the brake drum. So that's why those are just some of the little tricks and tips over the years. I've been working on brakes for a living since 1973. So that gives you an idea how much experience. I probably got thousands and thousands of brake jobs on every car that you can imagine out there, from Chevy to Ford to Honda to Fiat, Chrysler, you name it, whatever it is. I've done them, and some of them were not real easy, and some of them were pieces of cake, and some of them I had to sit there and go, how do you do this? I mean, I remember the first Fiat I worked on, how to get the rear shoes on there. Didn't know they spun in. Anyway, there's a lot of tricks out there. If you got a car question, give us a call, 850-763-0555. We do this show Monday through Friday from 6 to 6:30 right here on Fox 28. Who have I got calling? I got Karen Schoen calling in just a minute. We'll be right back.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guarantee.